All right, welcome in, everyone. We're diving deep into one of the most controversial moments in American journalism.
The Dark Alliance series.
That's the one. Published back in '96 by the San Jose Mercury News. Man, this series sparked a debate, and it's still going on today.
Still relevant, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And for this deep dive, we're going straight to the source. We've got excerpts from a 1997 Columbia Journalism Review article that really breaks down the Dark Alliance phenomenon, the fallout, the whole nine yards.
It'd be interesting.
For sure. So we're going to unpack those allegations. We'll look at the media's response and really dig into the questions, the lasting questions that this whole thing raised.
You know, it's fascinating because Dark Alliance wasn't the first time someone had explored this link between the Contra War in Nicaragua and drug trafficking.
Yeah. That surprised me too. Reading up on it, it was like, whoa. There were earlier reports, like way back in '85. There was that expose by Robert Perry and Brian Barger for the Associated Press.
Right, and they reveal that Contra groups were actually smuggling cocaine.
To fund their fight. Right.
Exactly. Against Nicaragua's Sandinista government.
But the Reagan administration, man, they really went after those reports.
They did. Tried to discredit them.
Downplay the whole thing. Makes you wonder what they were so worried about.
Right.
Even the 1989 Kerry Committee report, that was a Senate investigation, they found that the U.S. government knew about this, knew about the drug smuggling by the Contras, and basically looked the other way. And that barely made a dent in the media.
It's almost like it was swept under the rug. In
Ah.
that context, the findings of the Kerry Committee, they're essential for understanding the whole climate surrounding Dark Alliance. That report, it documented how the government justified tolerating drug trafficking.
Under the guise of national security.
Exactly. And that connection, right, between covert operations and the drug trade, it keeps popping up in this story.
So fast forward to August 1996. Dark Alliance explodes onto the scene. The San Jose Mercury News publishes it. The whole media landscape, I mean, it changes overnight. This series, it zeroed in on the crack cocaine network in California.
And the devastating impact on Black communities.
Yeah, how it ravaged those communities.
And this time it really hit a nerve. Those communities, they felt betrayed. They were wondering, like, did the government play a role in the very epidemic that was destroying their lives?
Yeah, and what strikes me is how the internet and Black Talk Radio, they amplified this message.
It's amazing. Remember, this is what, the mid-90s? The internet, it's still pretty new.
Oh, yeah.
But it already offered this alternative to mainstream media. And Black Talk Radio, that was powerful too.
Yeah.
It allowed for direct communication, right, to audiences who felt like the traditional media just wasn't listening.
Right, they felt ignored. It was like a true grassroots movement. People were like glued to the Mercury News website, talk radio. It just fueled the debate. And all that attention, it forced the CIA and the Justice Department to actually launch investigations.
Dark Alliance, it set off a chain reaction.
It did. Okay, so let's get into those core claims. What did Dark Alliance actually allege? Well, it said that a drug ring based in the San Francisco Bay Area sold tons of cocaine, tons to LA gangs.
Wow.
And then they funneled millions of dollars in profits back to a Contra army backed by, guess who, the CIA.
And they argued that this was the first pipeline.
That's what they said. Between Colombian cocaine cartels and Black neighborhoods in LA, they basically said that this network contributed to LA becoming, you know, what they called the crack capital of the world.
That's a heavy accusation.
Yeah.
And who were the key figures?
Okay, so they named some big names. Freeway, Ricky Ross, he was a major player in the LA crack trade. Oscar Danilo Blandon, a Nicaraguan drug trafficker tied to the Contras, and Juan Norvin Meneses, another Nicaraguan trafficker allegedly linked to the Contras.
And they built their case on Blandon, right?
Yeah, he was their main source.
Yeah.
His grand jury and court testimonies, along with documents, that was the foundation of their argument.
But a story this big, this explosive, it was bound to get pushed back. Dark Alliance, it drew some really sharp criticism, particularly from major newspapers.
Yeah, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, they all came out with these lengthy rebuttals. They were questioning everything.
The validity of the claims?
The strength of the evidence. They argued that the series relied too much on speculation, innuendo, to imply CIA involvement without, like, solid proof.
And they really focused on Blandon's testimony.
Oh, yeah.
Pointing out inconsistencies and contradictions, particularly about the timeline and how deeply the Contras were really involved.
So they were basically saying, hold on, this link between the drug ring and the CIA, not so fast.
Right. But not everyone bought into those criticisms.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Robert Perry, remember him? The one who broke the initial Contra drug story back in '85. He actually found Dark Alliance credible.
Hmm.
He felt that even if there were flaws in the reporting, it still exposed something significant, a truth about drug trafficking and how it devastated black communities. He argued it deserved more investigation, not, immediate dismissal.
So even the critics acknowledged the impact, especially how it gave a voice to those most affected by the crack epidemic.
Absolutely. Dark Alliance brought to light this complex, disturbing chapter in U.S. history. It forced the nation to really grapple with the realities of covert operations and, the unintended consequences, sometimes very bad consequences.
But there's more to the story. We have to look at the fallout, what it all meant in the grand scheme of things.
It's really striking, the initial silence from those big media outlets about Dark Alliance. It's like they completely ignored it.
Until it blew up online and on Black Talk Radio.
Exactly. It created this public outcry they couldn't ignore anymore. They were caught off guard by the power of those alternative platforms.
To shape the narrative. And even when they did respond, it felt like they were more focused on discrediting Gary Webb.
The journalists who wrote the series.
Right. Like less about actually investigating the claims.
Protecting their
The
reputation.
status quo makes you wonder whose voices get amplified in the media and whose get silenced.
It's a big question, especially with the focus on the crack epidemic's impact on black communities. Hard not to see a connection there.
Yeah, between that initial media blackout and the fact that those communities, they were marginalized, ignored by the mainstream.
And they felt that. They saw Dark Alliance as like finally someone's giving voice to their experiences, their pain, their sense of betrayal.
So let's talk about the lasting impact. Dark Alliance, even with its flaws, it ignited a national conversation.
About the CIA, drug trafficking, the government's role in the crack epidemic.
It forced people to confront this, dark side of U.S. foreign policy.
The consequences of covert operations.
And it changed the media landscape. It showed the rising power of the internet, talk radio.
Yeah, those platforms, they could challenge the traditional gatekeepers, empower marginalized voices.
Didn't they have a Senate hearing, too?
They did.
They called in Jack Blum.
Former lead investigator for the Kerry Committee.
Right, to testify.
His testimony is really important.
What'd he say?
Well, he acknowledged that the government turned a blind eye to drug trafficking by people linked to the Contras. Basically, they condoned it to push their agenda in Nicaragua. But he also maintained there was no evidence they intentionally targeted black communities with crack cocaine.
So even though he confirmed some pretty damning stuff about the government, those same media outlets that were so quick to dismiss Dark Alliance, they basically ignored him.
They cherry-picked the information that fit their narrative.
It all comes back to journalistic responsibility. Did those big newspapers prioritize the truth, or were they protecting institutions like the CIA?
Tough questions,
Yeah.
especially in this day and age, when trust in the government and the media is eroding.
Dark Alliance really exposed those fault lines.
That rift between the mainstream media and the communities affected by the crack epidemic, it showed the media landscape was changing. Alternative platforms were challenging the old hierarchies.
So what does all this mean for our listeners? What can we learn from this chapter in American history?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is to be skeptical. Question everything.
Don't just take things at face value.
Right. No matter who it's coming from,
Yeah.
dig deeper, look for different perspectives, be wary of narratives that seem too simple or too convenient. Dark Alliance. It really touched a nerve when it came to race and media representation.
Yeah, definitely. It exposed this deep mistrust between a lot of people in the black community and the mainstream media.
Those who felt like their stories, they just weren't being heard.
Ignored.
Dismissed by the institutions that were supposed to represent them.
And that initial silence from those big newspapers, that didn't help.
Just made it worse.
Yeah.
Alienated them even further.
And those declassified documents, some of them actually seemed to back up a key part of Dark Alliance, didn't they?
Yeah. We've got evidence from declassified documents, including Oliver North's notebooks. He was a key player in the Iran-Contra affair, selling arms to Iran to fund the Contras.
Secretly.
Right. And those documents suggest that U.S. officials, they knew about and sometimes even condoned drug trafficking by people linked to the Contras.
Like they looked the other way.
They saw it as a way to achieve their goals in Central America, a means to an end.
So even if Dark Alliance went too far with some of its claims, like about direct CIA involvement, it also uncovered some stuff that, well, some pretty powerful people didn't want out there.
It's a reminder that those in power, they don't always operate in the open. It's hard for journalists to find the truth, and it highlights how important a free press is,
A press that's not afraid to challenge those in power.
even when it's risky.
Gary Webb, the journalist who wrote Dark Alliance, man, he paid a price.
He faced so much criticism, it really hurt his career. It's a sad reminder of what journalists risk to bring these stories to light.
Dark Alliance, it's like a case study in media ethics.
Journalistic integrity,
And how tough it is to cover these complex, sensitive stories.
especially ones that deal with race, class, and power.
So, what does this mean for us today? I mean, we're living in this crazy media landscape, right? More complex than ever. What are the key takeaways? What do you hope people will remember from this?
Be skeptical. Question everything.
Don't just believe what you read.
Exactly. No matter where it comes from, dig deeper, find different points of view. Watch out for stories that seem too simple or too easy.
And be aware of our own biases.
Oh, absolutely. Our biases, they affect how we interpret things. Dark Alliance showed how media coverage, it can be shaped by those biases, especially when it comes to things like race and class.
And the search for the truth, it's not a one-time thing. It's ongoing.
It's a process. Rarely easy answers. It's our job to embrace that complexity, to be open to new information, to keep asking the hard questions.
This deep dive into Dark Alliance has been fascinating.
And unsettling at times.
It makes you think about our history, our government, the media.
It challenges us to be more critical, more thoughtful, more engaged citizens.
And that's what makes it so important. Thank you so much for walking us through all of this.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, keep those questions in mind as you explore the world. Keep digging, keep searching for your own truth. And until next time, keep diving deep.